A beautiful news reporter is broadcasting a bizarre murder case live on camera, where a husband brutally killed his wife and their 16-year-old son, then committed suicide. But just as the police are preparing to take the bodies away, the supposedly dead woman suddenly reanimates and attacks an unsuspecting officer. The cameraman spots the horrifying scene and quickly alerts the reporter behind him, only to reveal the woman clamping down on the officer's neck with her teeth. Another officer manages to separate them with great effort, but then the male corpse also comes back to life. Fortunately, a female officer reacts fast and kicks him away with full force. The other officers immediately open fire, but the bullets seem to have no effect on the man until one finally pierces through his head, and only then does he collapse. As the camera pans back, the woman has already reached the cameraman, and the poor reporter is bitten and disfigured on the spot, plunging the scene into utter chaos. But no one could have predicted this terrifying nightmare was just beginning. The film never explains why the dead are suddenly coming back to life, only that they're hard to kill, and the head is their only weak point. Anyone who is bitten or dies will also become a zombie. After the outbreak begins, the zombie virus spreads rapidly. Media coverage explodes, and the whole city falls into panic. Still, some people refuse to believe it's real, thinking it's just another media hoax to chase clicks. The scene shifts to a group of film students shooting a horror movie in the wild. Ironically, the film they're working on is called Dead Again, a zombie story about a resurrected mummy attacking people. But they keep reshooting one scene over and over, unable to meet director Jason's standards. He insists that real dead people wouldn't move that fast, and he's clearly unhappy with how Ridley, the actor playing the mummy, is performing. As the group argues about it, a radio broadcast suddenly reports news of the dead coming back to life and attacking people. They always thought zombies only existed in movies, never imagining they'd show up in real life. Only Tony, the makeup artist, doubts the news. He's convinced the media is just making stuff up again. But Ridley believes it's better to be safe than sorry. As a rich kid, he was pretty timid, so he immediately took his girlfriend Francine and drove home in his sports car. With a main actor gone, filming can't continue. Jason is also starting to feel uneasy, so he calls off the shoot for the day. When Jason returns to the dorm to find his girlfriend Debra, he's shocked to discover the place in total disarray, clearly abandoned in panic after the news broke. While passing by one room, Jason even catches a looter stealing during the chaos. He doesn't have time to deal with that. He quickly knocks on Debra's door, and thankfully she's okay, just terrified and hiding inside because of the news. Debra tells Jason she tried calling her family, but no one answered. Realizing how serious things have gotten, the group decides to hit the road in an RV and head home. Jason plans to document everything with his camera. Besides Ridley and Francine, who already left, the RV now carries 8 people. Mary, who owns the RV, Debra, Jason's girlfriend, Tony, the makeup artist, Tracy, the lead actress who was chased by the mummy, her boyfriend Gordo, Elliot, the lighting technician, and Professor Maxwell from their school. Meanwhile, the news is still reporting on the zombie outbreak, but the government keeps telling people not to panic, assuring them everything is under control and will be resolved soon. Yet the calmer the government sounds, the more everyone starts to believe things are far worse than they're letting on. Just another tactic to prevent mass hysteria. Sure enough, not long after the RV hit the road, they encountered a burning car in the middle of the street. To their horror, the driver, severely burned all over, calmly walked out of the flames as if nothing had happened. Everyone widened their eyes in shock. No normal person could survive that. This had to be one of the zombies from the news. Within seconds, the zombie approached the driver's seat where Mary was, and the terrifying sight made her slam the pedal and drive the RV forward in panic. But just as they rushed ahead, 3 more zombies appeared in the middle of the road. Mary couldn't swerve in time and was forced to run them over. Even though they escaped danger, no one felt relieved. Instead, unease filled the air, because none of them knew if the people they just crushed were truly zombies. Mary stared ahead with a blank expression, silently driving the RV forward. Not until 3 a.m. did she hit the brakes, only after being reminded by her companions. She still hadn't recovered from the shock and was overwhelmed with guilt for running over those zombies. Debra tried to comfort her, saying she did the right thing. They weren't human anymore. But Tony, who still didn't believe in zombies, insisted that Mary had run over a living person because dead people can't get up and walk. His words shattered Mary completely. A devout believer, she broke down and stepped out of the RV in tears. Everyone assumed she just needed a moment alone, so no one followed her. But then, a gunshot rang out. Overcome by remorse, Mary had taken her own life. No one expected Mary to do something so extreme, let alone that she had a weapon on her. They rushed over to check her condition, only to find her face mangled and covered in blood. Everyone blamed Tony for what he said, except Debra, who realized Mary was still barely alive. They didn't hesitate any longer and sped off to get Mary to the nearest hospital. But to their shock, the massive hospital was completely deserted, with signs of chaos all over the floor. Seeing that Mary was barely hanging on, they desperately searched for a doctor. At last, they spotted a figure inside one of the rooms. But when they saw the person's face clearly, everyone instantly froze in fear. The doctor had already turned into a zombie and had just devoured a patient. Gordo didn't hesitate. He raised his gun and shot the zombie straight in the head. Before they could even catch their breath, a zombie nurse emerged from the room as well. To make things worse, the pistol jammed at the critical moment. In the end, it was Debra who stayed calm and used a defibrillator to finish the zombie off. At this point, even Tony could no longer deny reality. Zombies were real. And even though hope was fading fast, the group still hadn't given up on finding a doctor. But with the camera battery running low, Jason decided to stay behind and recharge it. To him, as important as Mary's life was, documenting everything that was happening was even more critical. Once the others left, Jason immediately plugged in the power. Surrounded by corpses and a dying friend, Jason couldn't help but feel uneasy. Suddenly, a scream from the next room. It was Debra. After a struggle, Debra appeared in front of Jason, covered in blood. She had just killed a zombie herself, and even found another camera. Pointing the camera at Jason, she expressed her frustration. She had long been angry at how he kept filming everything, even in a time like this. Since he loved filming so much, she said they'd film together. But just as Debra aimed the lens ahead, they saw the patient who had been eaten start to transform. Fortunately, before it could get off the bed, Gordo rushed in and ended it immediately. But right after that, they were horrified to discover that Mary had completely stopped breathing. Her eyes had turned white, and it looked like she was about to turn. Only then did they realize that anyone who dies will become a zombie. Facing a classmate about to turn, even Gordo, usually so decisive, was frozen in hesitation. Professor Maxwell took the gun from Gordo's hands and shot Mary before she could transform. It was clear that staying in the hospital was no longer meaningful, so they decided to leave immediately. But as they made their way out, a mutated patient suddenly lunged out and bit Elliot, who was walking at the rear. Gordo grabbed a camera rig and charged forward, stabbing the zombie repeatedly in a frenzy, and only when it was on the ground did he deliver the final blow. Unfortunately, Gordo had already been bitten. It was only a matter of time before he turned. They carried Mary's body out of the hospital, and the next morning, buried her in a peaceful place. As for Gordo, who had been bitten, he was now unconscious on the ground. To prevent him from turning, Tony held a gun and prepared to put him down. But Tracy, Gordo's girlfriend, couldn't bring herself to do it. She still held on to a sliver of hope, insisting they wait until he actually transformed before doing anything. To respect Tracy's feelings, everyone could only stand a short distance away and wait. Before long, Gordo began to transform, shattering Tracy's hopes completely. With a heavy heart, she raised the gun and aimed it at her boyfriend. After burying the body on the spot, the remaining group continued on their journey. But trouble struck again. The RV broke down on the road. They pushed the vehicle to the side and began inspecting it to find the problem. Tracy, not only beautiful, but also skilled, quickly identified that the fuel line had malfunctioned. Her father was a professional mechanic, so she had learned a lot from him over the years. But Debra was worried about dangers outside, so she suggested pushing the RV into a nearby barn. As she was about to check if anyone was on the farm, an old man wearing a straw hat suddenly appeared. Tony thought he was a zombie and raised his gun, but luckily Elliot stopped him. The man, Samuel, was mute and couldn't speak. He carried a writing board with him to communicate. He was the owner of the farm. When he found out their RV had broken down and needed shelter for repairs, the kind-hearted Samuel agreed without hesitation and pointed behind him, urging them to move quickly. A few zombies were already closing in on them. As they hesitated, Samuel had already retrieved a stick of dynamite from the barn. With Samuel providing cover, they successfully pushed the RV into the barn, and Tracy immediately got to work on the repairs. But the explosion had drawn even more trouble. A large group of zombies had surrounded the barn. Soon, it seemed some zombies had even slipped into the farmhouse. To give Tracy time to finish the repairs, the others went searching for the zombies. They managed to find and take out 2 of them. But one zombie had set its sights on Tracy, who was still working under the RV. At the last second, Samuel rushed over with a scythe, dragged the zombie out, and Tony shot it in the head. Tracy quickly managed to repair the RV successfully, but they had to leave immediately. The barn wouldn't hold for much longer. Debra jumped into the driver's seat and started the engine. Samuel helped them push open the barn doors. Outside, a horde of zombies was already waiting. Samuel and Tony opened the gates and sprinted toward the RV, but a zombie suddenly grabbed Samuel from behind and bit him. Knowing he was now infected, Samuel chose to go down with the zombies in a final act of defiance. The others could do nothing but drive away in silence. They continued heading toward home, but zombies could be seen everywhere they went. The disaster was far worse than they had imagined, but their supplies were nearly gone, and with the fuel running low, they were forced to risk another supply run. They arrived at a gas station and had just agreed on a plan when a group of armed survivors suddenly emerged from the woods behind them. With M16 rifles in hand, one burst could kill them all. Tony had no choice but to surrender and drop his weapon. They had thought these people were robbers, or maybe even worse, but to their surprise, they weren't bad at all. They even brought the group back to their camp. The camp was fully stocked with supplies, including fuel. Since they were armed, these men had taken control of the small town after the outbreak. The leader relished the temporary power in this lawless world, but they didn't harm innocent people. They simply gathered all usable resources and distributed them as needed. Meanwhile, zombie news still played on the TV, but the footage had clearly been edited. Authorities were still trying to cover up the truth. That's why Jason was so determined to keep filming. He wanted the truth to be known. When he learned the camp had internet access, Jason immediately uploaded one of his videos. Within minutes, it had racked up hundreds of thousands of views. Debra still didn't understand why Jason was so obsessed with filming. She believed their top priority should be getting home, but Jason argued that the news was full of lies, and if people believed those lies, more would die. Only by showing the truth could people prepare and protect themselves. He was trying to save lives. Hearing this, Debra finally understood what Jason was trying to do. At that moment, Ridley and his girlfriend contacted Jason through a video call. From the looks of it, they were safe. But bad news struck the camp. One of the men suddenly died from a heart attack, and the key point was that the body had disappeared, clearly having turned into a zombie and was now wandering somewhere. To eliminate the threat, the leader led a team to search the camp. They soon found the zombie, but it was surrounded by fuel canisters. Shooting was far too risky. In a panic, Tony grabbed a glass jar and smashed it over the zombie's head. To everyone's surprise, the jar was filled with acid, and it burned straight through the zombie's skull. Crisis averted, Jason and the others decided it was time to leave the camp. The leader not only filled up their RV's gas tank, but also gave them extra supplies and a few weapons for protection. The group set off again. Along the way, they were horrified to learn that zombies had appeared all over the world. Some media outlets denied it, while others confirmed it. Conflicting reports flooded the internet, and no one knew what to believe. The only certainty was that the world was falling apart. Soon they arrived at Debra's house. Inside, the rooms were empty. The car was still in the garage, which meant her family hadn't left. But a broken window was covered in blood. Things didn't look good. With a pounding heart, Debra searched every corner for her family. She entered a room, only for a figure to suddenly pounce on her. It was her brother, now a zombie. Debra struggled to break free, but couldn't escape. At the last second, Maxwell drew his bow and shot the zombie, saving her. Debra had no time to grieve. Frantic, she kept searching for her parents. Then she saw her mutated mother appear from behind the couch, chewing on her father's severed hand. At that moment, Debra completely broke down. Once again, Maxwell shot an arrow and killed Debra's zombie mother. Seeing the tragedy at Debra's home, the others gave up any hope of returning to their own. Now, their top priority was finding a safe place to hide. Jason remembered that back at the camp, Ridley had contacted him. His family's villa looked secure, so they immediately decided to head there. But on the way, 2 military vehicles suddenly appeared and blocked their path. At first, they were thrilled to see soldiers, thinking they were finally saved, but they quickly realized something was wrong. The lead soldier threatened Jason to turn off his camera and then took all of their supplies. Turns out, in a zombie-infested apocalypse, even soldiers couldn't be trusted. At least their weapons hadn't been taken, so they continued heading for Ridley's villa. Before long, they finally arrived. Strangely, the villa gate was wide open, and the front door on the first floor was also ajar. Could it be that something had happened to Ridley and his family? The group cautiously entered the hall. Tracy immediately had a bad feeling. Everywhere they went, zombies seemed to follow. After closing the front door, they began searching for Ridley. The entire villa was covered in security cameras. It should have been safe. Something didn't add up. There was uneaten food on the table, meaning they had been here just moments ago. Fortunately, it turned out to be a false alarm. A hidden door behind a bookshelf opened. Ridley was safe. He had simply been hiding in a panic room. But where were his family and girlfriend? When questioned, Ridley dodged their concerns, claiming they were in other rooms and that he forgot to close the door when he returned. Although suspicious, everyone was just relieved to see Ridley alive, so they didn't press further. After all the chaos, they could finally rest a bit. But Jason still hadn't put down his camera. He even handed another one to Tony, asking him to film as well. Tony tried to refuse, but Jason shoved the camera into his hands anyway. Now, the footage switched to Tony's perspective. Soon he noticed something off. Ridley seemed to be craving meat, and they still hadn't seen his family or girlfriend. Under Debra's pressing questions, Ridley finally confessed. It started when his father suddenly dropped dead and turned into a zombie. attacking the rest of the family. Ridley managed to take down his father and threw all the corpses into the swimming pool. He took Debra and Tony to see the pool, but when they turned around, Ridley had vanished. Tony, always observant, noticed there was blood on Ridley's hand when he opened the door. It was obvious he had been bitten. Checking the surveillance footage, they saw Ridley stumble and collapse by the door, only to rise again as a zombie. Inside, Elliot was showering with no idea what was happening and became Ridley's first victim. After devouring Elliot, Ridley staggered out of the villa. Meanwhile, Jason and Tracy were unloading supplies from the RV when Ridley suddenly reappeared. Jason didn't realize Ridley was now a zombie, not until he lunged at Tracy with a grotesque face. Tracy struggled free just in time. But even then, Jason refused to stop filming. He stood there watching Ridley chase after Tracy. It was a direct echo of the scene they had filmed at the very beginning of their student movie. Jason even shouted at Ridley, "I told you, dead things move slow." Clearly, beyond exposing the truth, Jason also wanted to complete his own movie. Luckily, Ridley's slow movements gave Tracy the chance to strike and knock him down, but Jason's behavior deeply disappointed her. She knew if she stayed with him, she'd be the next to die. Ignoring his pleas, Tracy drove off alone in the RV. Back with Tony, they spotted Tracy driving away on her own. Jason came in and told them that Ridley had turned into a zombie. Maxwell added that he'd found Elliot's body in the bathroom. Now, with Tracy gone, only 4 of them remained, and the villa was no longer safe. Debra suggested they hide in Ridley's panic room, but just as they were packing up, Ridley suddenly appeared behind Jason and bit into his neck. Although Jason was on the verge of death, he still held tightly onto the camera. He crawled to it, filming one last moment, Ridley being shot and killed by Maxwell. Barely clinging to life, Jason handed the camera to Debra and asked Tony to end it for him. This was his final shot. By now, morning had come. Looking at the surveillance, they saw the villa surrounded by zombies. The corpses in the pool had mutated and were crawling out, including Elliot in the bathroom. In the final scenes of the film, only 3 survivors remain, hiding in the panic room. The world outside was still a nightmare. Some people even took pleasure in the apocalypse, tying zombies to trees and lighting them on fire for fun. As a found-footage zombie horror film, Diary of the Dead lacked the intensity and suspense of Wreck, but the ideas it aimed to express were worth examining. It was full of social metaphors. In the face of events that threaten social stability, the media's first instinct is to hide the truth, to avoid chaos. But this often causes even greater disasters. Just like in this movie, if people had known the truth from the beginning and prepared early, perhaps everything wouldn't have spiraled out of control. As a film student about to graduate, Jason felt it was his duty to reveal the truth in his own way. Though his methods were extreme, even selfish at times, his intentions were good. And in the end, he paid the ultimate price for failing to stop Ridley in time, a consequence of his own obsession. Beyond that, the film also showed the dark side of humanity in an apocalypse. Survivors fled for their lives while some with weapons declared themselves kings and reveled in power. Soldiers who once protected civilians became roadside bandits just to survive. And worst of all, some even hunted zombies for fun, as if this doomsday was made for them. In his final moments, Jason kept filming, desperate to show the world the truth. Alright, that's the end of today's video. Thanks to all our viewers for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.